Hi there. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video. It genuinely means a lot to me. If you enjoy what you see here, consider subscribing. It'd honestly make my day. But let's not waste time. Let's get into the story. My name is Bruce, and I never thought that aimlessly browsing through Instagram would become the trigger that unraveled my marriage. Yet there I was, standing in our bedroom, facing my wife, asking a seemingly innocent question, one that made her go pale, clutching the towel like it was the only thing keeping her together. In that instant, I realized this casual experiment of mine was heading toward a result I hadn't anticipated. Beatrice and I had been together for many years when everything began to fall apart. We were long past the early sparks of a new romance. What we had evolved into something more grounded, something steady, peaceful. A kind of connection that develops when you've spent years sharing breakfasts, weeknight dinners, and countless ordinary moments. There were still small signs of affection between us. A hand gently reaching for mine during a movie, a warm smile when one of us got home from work. No grand declarations or fireworks, but there was love. Familiar, comfortable, home. Our days had settled into a routine that felt both predictable and comforting. I'd head out around 8 a.m. to my job at a construction firm. Beatrice would leave shortly after to begin her day at the library, where she worked as a research librarian. Our evenings followed a familiar rhythm, prepping dinner, catching up on the day, maybe watching a show or reading side by side. Weekends were a mix of errands, social catch-ups, and well-earned rest. It wasn't exciting in a cinematic sense, but it worked. It felt genuine. A life rooted in shared understanding, small joys, and mutual trust. One morning, I woke up with an aching back. Bad enough that I decided to stay home for the day. After Beatrice left, I settled in to rest, but quickly found myself restless. I figured I might as well tackle a few items from my to-do list. Working remotely always felt slightly out of sync with my usual job. No safety gear, no on-site meetings, just me, paperwork, spreadsheets, and files, all spread out in our spare room. By the middle of the afternoon, after wrestling with some budget numbers that stubbornly refused to add up, I gave myself a break. I picked up my phone and started scrolling through Instagram, just looking to kill a few minutes. Nothing serious. That's when I stumbled across a reel that had clearly resonated with a lot of people. The creator asked, "How did you find out your partner was unfaithful?" The comment section was on fire. Instead of moving on, I got pulled in. The stories were endless, some hilarious in their absurdity, others sharp and full of sorrow. There were wild tales of dramatic confrontations, absurd slip-ups, outrageous lies exposed, and even misunderstandings that led to shocking truths. But there were also quiet, devastating confessions, accounts of broken trust, quiet tears, and the slow collapse of relationships. People explained the various ways they'd uncovered the truth. Some had stumbled upon suspicious texts. Others noticed odd patterns or contradictions. A few went as far as hiring private investigators. Others had just asked a question, and the truth slipped out. One comment in particular wouldn't leave my mind. Someone wrote about how they had discovered the affair by simply asking their partner, "So how long has it been going on?" A question that implied they already knew. Caught off guard, their partner confessed without hesitation. There was something brilliant in its simplicity. No evidence, no accusations, just a calm statement cloaked in assumed knowledge. That illusion of being exposed had been enough to trigger the truth. I found the psychology behind it fascinating. That one question seemed to bypass denial, dodging defensiveness and reaching straight into the guilt. A sudden jolt of fear could apparently unravel the most carefully guarded secret. Even after I'd put the phone down, my mind kept circling back to that comment. Not because I suspected anything. Beatrice hadn't given me a single reason to question her, no strange behavior, no late nights, no locked phones. Still, I couldn't help but wonder. What would she do if I asked her the same question? Would she laugh and brush it off? Roll her eyes and tell me I'd been watching too many videos? Or would she react differently, somehow? unpredictably. What started as idle curiosity began to take on weight. I told myself it was harmless, a thought experiment, nothing more, just a way to see if the theory had any merit. By the time her workday was winding down, I'd made up my mind. I was going to ask. I ran it through my head again and again, expecting a smirk, maybe even a light scolding for being ridiculous. When she came through the door, everything felt normal. I greeted her the way I always did. We chatted about our days. I told her how little I'd accomplished, thanks to my aching back and a stubborn spreadsheet. She talked about her day at the library, mentioned a few odd research requests, and floated an idea for our weekend plans. After a bit, she said she was going to take a shower and change, just part of her regular routine. She headed upstairs and I waited, letting her settle in. About 10 minutes later, I climbed the stairs, my steps quiet, my nerves tangled. I paused at the doorway of our bedroom and waited. The shower was still running. That soft sound gave me one last moment to gather my thoughts. I was about to speak words that might change the course of everything, or might amount to absolutely nothing. I truly didn't know which it would be. At that time, I was still convinced that this would amount to nothing more than an unfortunate mix-up. Maybe Beatrice would be puzzled or slightly irritated, but once I explained what I'd found online, we'd both laugh at how ridiculous it sounded, and the moment would pass uneventfully. I waited just outside the bathroom door as soon as the sound of running water ceased, planning my timing carefully so she'd be at ease and unguarded, exactly as the technique I'd come across had described. The door swung open and Beatrice emerged, wrapped in a towel, her damp hair clinging to the sides of her neck. She looked mildly surprised to see me there, but not upset. If anything, she seemed pleased, even about to greet me with a warm remark. A small smile started to appear, but before she could speak, I interrupted her with the question I had rehearsed. I kept my eyes locked on hers, doing my best to appear calm and assured, and asked, "How long has this been happening?" I kept my voice as even and composed as possible, aiming for a tone that implied I already knew the answer, not one fishing for an explanation. Her reaction was immediate and unmistakable. She froze in place. The smile disappeared in an instant, like a switch had been flipped. Her skin turned ashen, her eyes widened, and an unmistakable expression of fear took hold. I stood motionless, watching as her features shifted from surprise to panic. This wasn't the look of someone confused by a bizarre accusation. It was the look of someone who had just been exposed. The advice I had followed had clearly provoked a response, just not the one I had hoped for. The silence between us was thick and suffocating as we stared at each other, neither of us moving. Her eyes flicked nervously, as if searching for a way out, and her expression now betrayed a guilt so clear it couldn't be denied. My stomach turned as the weight of her reaction began to register fully. When she finally broke the silence, her voice was barely audible. "I can explain," she said, her tone shaky and uncertain. That brief sentence hit harder than anything else. It was confirmation of what I hadn't wanted to believe, that something had happened, something she had kept from me, and that my question had brought it to light. I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed as I tried to grasp what was unfolding in front of me. The woman I had trusted without hesitation, who I believed had been as committed to our marriage as I was hiding something significant. And instead of reacting with denial or disbelief, she was preparing to come clean. When I finally found my voice, it came out low and strained. I asked her to tell me the truth. The whole scene felt unreal, like I had stepped out of my own life and into a distorted version of it where nothing felt familiar anymore. Beatrice began to speak quickly, as if the words might suffocate her if she kept them inside. She admitted to an affair, recent, according to her, and when she told me who it was, my world fractured. Gregory, of everyone possible, someone I had known for years, someone I'd considered a friend. He was married too. The four of us had shared meals, holidays, countless hours of conversation. I had confided in him, trusted him, laughed with him, and now I was hearing that he had been sleeping with my wife. The betrayal cut in layers, first hers, then his, then the betrayal of our shared bond, and all the moments that now seemed poisoned by deceit. The fact that she had chosen him, a man who had dined at our table, clasped my hand in friendship, confided in me, made it all the more grotesque. As she spoke, trying to give context, insisting it was a one-time mistake, that it hadn't meant anything, that she regretted it immediately, I found myself unable to absorb her words. She said she loved me, that she wanted to fix what we had, but nothing she said could pierce through the numbing storm of disbelief that had overtaken me. Everything was cast into doubt. If she could hide this, what else had she kept from me? How could I take her word that it had happened only once, that it hadn't meant anything? The following days were agonizing. Every conversation was strained and clipped, weighed down by tension and things we didn't say. Meals became silent rituals. Time crawled, each moment heavy with the awareness of what had been broken. I found myself watching her when she wasn't aware of it, analyzing her face, her body language, trying to detect traces of deceit, deciphering every sentence for subtext. Sleep eluded me. I would lie beside her, unable to close my eyes, listening to her breathing and wondering if her thoughts belonged to someone else now. I questioned everything, every embrace, every kiss, every shared memory, wondering whether it had ever been real or if I'd just been blind all along. Work became my only brief refuge. There, I could distract myself with tasks that had logic and resolution. But even that reprieve didn't last long. People began to notice. Coworkers asked if I was okay, if things were all right at home. Whatever mask I thought I'd been wearing was clearly transparent. Gregory's involvement made it all so much worse. I kept replaying our past interactions, scanning them for signs I had missed. Had he always been this way? Had I ignored the warning signs? And then there was his wife. Did she know? Or was she living in the same false reality I had been? Was it my place to tell her? My relationship with Beatrice became a hollow version of what it once was. We shared a space, but emotionally, we were worlds apart. I couldn't talk to her the way I used to. I couldn't touch her. The trust that once defined our connection had vanished, and its absence left only cold distance. To her credit, Beatrice seemed to understand how deep the wound had gone. She tried to reconnect. She became more present, more affectionate, as though hoping to reignite what we had lost. But each attempt only highlighted how far we had fallen. Her efforts felt like reminders of what used to be, not bridges back to it. Everything had shifted. And no matter how much she wanted to pretend otherwise, the past was no longer reachable. We were somewhere else now, somewhere unfamiliar, broken, and irreversibly changed. The ease and mutual understanding that once characterized our marriage had slowly eroded, replaced by an atmosphere of uncertainty and emotional withdrawal. What had once felt like a seamless connection between us now seemed fractured beyond repair. I found myself not just questioning her recent actions, but reevaluating our entire history together. Had she always been capable of such deception? Were there other instances of betrayal that I'd simply failed to notice? I began to wonder if our relationship had ever been as solid as I believed, or if I had been selectively blind to her potential for disloyalty all along. About a month into this emotionally strained and disconnected chapter, Beatrice brought up the idea of couples therapy. She suggested it as a way to address what had happened between us and perhaps salvage the remnants of our bond. It was clear she had done her homework. She had already identified a therapist who specialized in working with couples affected by infidelity. My initial reaction was skepticism. How could therapy possibly mend something that felt so thoroughly broken? The trust between us had been deeply compromised, and I struggled to imagine that guided conversations could undo that damage. But Beatrice was persistent, and eventually I agreed to try. Not out of confidence that it would work, but because I needed to know we had exhausted every option before giving up. Part of me also hoped that hearing an objective perspective might help me sort through my own confusion and turmoil. The therapy sessions turned out to be emotionally draining, yet surprisingly illuminating. In that structured setting, we were forced to confront the affair directly and unpack the layers of emotion surrounding it. To my surprise, Beatrice began to open up more fully during these meetings. She offered details about her relationship with Gregory and expressed regret for the hurt she had caused. She spoke of feeling trapped in the monotony of our daily lives, of longing for a spark or affirmation that she believed had vanished from our marriage. While I valued her honesty and her willingness to dig into the reasons behind her choices, her revelations also uncovered unsettling truths, both about her character and about the weaknesses in our relationship. The fact that she had sought out emotional or physical fulfillment elsewhere rather than facing our issues with me directly pointed to deeper problems, gaps in communication, and a lack of mutual commitment that went beyond just the affair. With guidance from our therapist, we began to investigate the root causes of her actions and discuss potential paths toward rebuilding what had been lost. We worked on improving our communication, acknowledging each other's emotional needs, and establishing new habits of connection, changes that might, in theory, help us prevent future damage. Yet, as our sessions progressed into weeks and then months, I found myself gaining clarity, not about how to fix our marriage, but about my own emotional boundaries. Therapy helped me understand the mechanisms behind the betrayal, but it also forced me to confront a difficult realization. I wasn't sure I could ever fully forgive or forget. The deeper we delved into the process, the more apparent it became that some breaches of trust create wounds that never truly heal. Whenever Beatrice stayed out late, mentioned a male colleague, or seemed emotionally distant, my mind spiraled into doubt. I couldn't help but question her sincerity, feel the urge to probe, to second-guess what I was being told. That constant vigilance, born out of broken trust, was mentally and emotionally depleting. Even if she remained faithful from that point on, the safe emotional foundation our marriage had once rested on seemed irretrievable. One of the more unexpected outcomes of therapy was how it reshaped my understanding of what marriage meant to me. I had always believed in a core principle of loyalty and shared dedication, a principle that, in our case, had been irrevocably compromised. While I acknowledged that some couples managed to rebuild after infidelity, forging stronger connections through transparency and effort, I came to recognize that I might not be one of them. Our therapist frequently advised us to withhold final decisions until we had fully processed our emotions. But for me, the more we talked, the more certain I became. Not the other way around. I began to confront a sobering truth. Salvaging our relationship would require accepting a version of it that no longer aligned with my values. What once felt like a partnership grounded in mutual respect and trust now seemed reduced to a fragile arrangement, shadowed by lingering suspicion. Investing more time and energy into rebuilding something so fundamentally altered felt like a losing battle. I started to believe that those emotional resources might be better spent elsewhere, perhaps on a future relationship with someone who hadn't already broken the trust that once anchored us. During one particularly candid session, I finally voiced what had been crystallizing in my mind for some time. I was ready to end the marriage. My decision wasn't motivated by anger or a desire for retribution. Rather, it stemmed from a hard-earned sense of clarity. I understood now that the trust needed to sustain a meaningful partnership could not be revived between us. Some betrayals, I realized, leave marks that even the best intentions and therapeutic guidance cannot erase. Beatrice was devastated by my decision. Over the course of our therapy, we had both come to fully grasp the magnitude of what had been lost because of her affair with Gregory. When we eventually moved forward with a divorce, the process, though painful, was conducted with a surprising degree of civility. The groundwork laid in therapy had at least allowed us to approach the end of our marriage with mutual respect. We divided our lives equitably, avoiding the hostility that so often accompanies such endings. Looking back, it still strikes me as surreal that this entire unraveling began with a casual question I encountered on social media. I had tried a technique, almost as a lark, just to see if it would work. And it had, exposing a reality I hadn't even suspected, one I might never have discovered otherwise. The irony is sharp. A fleeting moment of curiosity prompted by a viral post ultimately brought a hidden truth to light. In the end, the deception was never truly concealed. It had simply been overlooked, buried beneath my assumptions that someone I trusted was being honest. Beatrice's affair with Gregory had unfolded right under my nose, involving someone I saw regularly, without a single visible sign of what was actually taking place. That moment marked a turning point for me. It revealed just how fragile yet fundamentally important trust is within any relationship. Until then, I hadn't grasped how, once severely broken, trust might never be rebuilt, even when both individuals are sincerely committed to reconciliation. Looking back, I'm ultimately grateful I discovered Beatrice's betrayal, as devastating as it was, and despite the fact that it ended our marriage. Living in a reality constructed on deception would have caused deeper damage than facing the painful truth and finding the perspective I needed to move ahead. When she hesitated in response to my unexpected question, something unspoken became unmistakably clear. In that silence, she exposed more about the state of our relationship than years of conversation ever had. I realized then that the most revealing moments often don't require many words. It's not always what someone says that speaks volumes, but how they react to the questions they never expected, the ones that graze the parts of themselves they intended to keep hidden. And so, this chapter comes to a close. I welcome any thoughts you'd like to share in the comments. Thank you for watching. If this story struck a chord with you, I encourage you to explore more content on the channel. Until we meet again, be well.